night 2 and still going down with Be Careful What You Wish For by Jeffrey Archer. It's the second night and I'll be doing 17 minutes. Initially I was supposed to start at 1, but Africa, some more internet problems, so I need to get stable internet by like 2. So we're starting at 9 minutes past 2, so that means by like 25 we should be done by like 25. So we are doing the third we are already arrived on the third chapter, I guess. A 2-bit South American gangster who, because he's got some money and lives in Eaton Square, thinks he can pass himself off as a gentleman. Don Pedro pressed a button underneath his desk. A moment later, the door opened burst. Don Pedro pressed a button underneath his desk. A moment later, the door burst open and Carl came charging in. Throw this man out, he said, pointing at the colonel, while I get my lawyer on the line. Good morning, Lieutenant Lonsdorf, said the colonel as Carl began to advance towards him. As a former member of the SS, you'll appreciate the weak position your master is in. Carl stopped in his tracks. So allow me to also give you a word of advice. Should Mr. Martinez fail to abide by my terms, our plans for you do not include the deportation order to Buenos Aires, where so many of your former colleagues are currently languishing. No, we have another destination in mind, where you will find several citizens who will be only too happy to give evidence concerning the role you played as one of the Himmler's trusted lieutenants, and the lengths you went in order to extract information from them. You're bluffing, said Martinez. You'd never get away with it. How little you really know about the British, Mr. Martinez, said the colonel as he rose from his chair and walked across to the window. Allow me to introduce to you a few typical specimens of our island race. Martinez and Carl joined him and stared out of the window. On the far side of the road stood 3 men you wouldn't want as enemies. 3 of my most trusted colleagues, explained the colonel. One of them will be watching you night and day, just hoping you'll make a false move. On the left is Captain Hartley, who is unfortunately cashiered from the Dragoon Guards for pouring petrol over his wife and her lover, who were sleeping peacefully at that time, until he lit a match. Understandably, after leaving prison, he found it difficult to secure employment. That was until I picked him up off the streets and put some purpose back in his life. Hartley gave them a warm smile, as if he knew they were talking about him. In the middle is Corporal Cran, a carpenter by trade. He so enjoys sewing things up, wood or bone. It doesn't seem to make any difference to him. Cran stared blankly through them. But I confess, continued the colonel, my favorite is Sergeant Roberts, a registered sociopath. Harmless most of the time, but I'm afraid he never really settled back into Civvy Street after the war. The colonel turned to Martinez. Perhaps I shouldn't have told him that you made your fortune collaborating with the Nazis. But of course, that's how you met Lieutenant Lonsdorf. A tidbit I don't think I'll share with Roberts unless you really annoy me, because you see, Sergeant Roberts' mother was Jewish. Don Pedro turned away from the window to see Carl staring at the colonel as if he would have been happy to strangle him, but accepted that now was not the time or place. "I'm so glad to have caught your attention," said Scott Hopkins, "because I now feel even more confident that you have worked out what is in your best interests. Good day, gentlemen. I'll show myself out." Chapter 4. "There is a great deal for us to cover on today's agenda," said the chairman. "So I would appreciate it if my fellow directors would keep their contributors short and to the point." Emma had come to admire Ross Buchanan's business-like approach when chairing the Barrington Shipping Company board meetings. He never showed favor to any particular director, and always listened carefully to anybody who offered a view contrary to his own. Occasionally, just occasionally, he could even be persuaded to change his mind. He also possessed the ability to sum up a complex discussion while making sure that everyone's particular view was well represented. Emma knew that some board members found his Scottish manner and a little brusque, but he considered it no more than practical, and sometimes wondered how her approach might differ from his. If she were ever to become chairman, she quickly dismissed the thought and began to concentrate on the most important item on the agenda. Emma had rehearsed what she was going to say the night before, with Harry acting as chairman. Once Philip Webster, the company secretary, had read the minutes of the last meeting and dealt with any questions arising, the chairman moved on to the first item on the agenda, a proposal that the board should put out to tender the building of the MV Buckingham, a luxury liner that would be added to the Barrington fleet. Buchanan left the board in no doubt that he felt he was the only this was the only way forward if Barrington's hoped to continue as one of the premier shipping companies in the land. Several members of the board nodded in agreement. Once the chairman had put his case, he called upon Emma to present the contrary view. She began by suggesting that while the bank rate was at an all-time high, the company should be consolidating its position and not risking such a large financial outlay on something that, in her opinion, had at best a 50-50 chance of succeeding. Mr. Anscott, an executive director who had been appointed to the board by Sir Hugo Barrington, her late father, suggested it was time to push the boat out. No one laughed. Rear Admiral Summers felt they shouldn't go ahead with such a radical decision without the shareholders' approval. "It is we who are on the bridge," Buchanan reminded the admiral, "and therefore we who would be making the decisions." The admiral scowled but offered no further comment. After all this, his vote would speak for itself. Emma listened carefully as each member of the board gave his opinion, and quickly realized that the directors were highly divided. One or two hadn't yet made up their minds, but she suspected that if it came to a vote, the chairman would prevail. An hour later, the board were no nearer to making a decision, with some of the directors simply repeating their earlier arguments, which clearly irritated Buchanan. But Emma knew he would eventually have to move, as there was other important business that needed to be discussed. I am bound to say, said the chairman in his coming up, that we cannot put off making a decision for much longer, and therefore I suggest we all go away and think carefully about who we stand on this particular issue. Frankly, the future of the company is at stake. I propose that when we meet again next month, we take a vote on whether to put the job out to tender or to drop the whole idea, or at least wait until the calmer waters prevail, suggested Emma. The chairman reluctantly moved on, and as the remaining items on the agenda were far less contentious, by Jeffrey Archer. Pardon my connection. I have one piece of information that is my duty to report to the board, said the company secretary. You cannot have failed to notice that our share price has been rising steadily over the past few weeks, and you may well have wondered why, as we have made no significant announcement or issued any profit forecasts recently. Yesterday that mystery was solved when I received a letter from the manager of the Midland Bank in St. James's, Mayfair, informing me that one of his clients was in possession of 7.5% of the company's stock, and therefore would be appointing a director to represent them on the board. Let me guess, said Emma. None other than Major Alex Fisher. I fear so, said the chairman, uncharacteristically lowering his guide. And are there any prizes for guessing who the good Major will be representing? Asked the Admiral. None, replied Buchanan, because you would be wrong. Sorry. Although I must confess that when I first heard the news like you, I assumed it would be our old friend, Lady Virginia Fenwick. However, the manager of the Midland assures me that her ladyship is not one of the bank's clients. When I pressed him on the subject of who owned the shares, he said politely that he was unable to disclose that information, which is banking parlance. When I pressed him on the subject of who owned the shares, he said politely that he was unable to disclose that information, which is banking parlance for mind your own business. Go. Banking parlance for mind your own business. These British are tired with their English. I had never imagined myself making a statement and then I add the word parlance. What? I should go ask for my school fees back. Why did they teach us those things? I can't wait to discover how the Major will cast his vote on the proposed building of the Buckingham, said Emma with a wiry smile. Because of one thing we can be sure. Whoever he represents certainly won't have Barrington's interest at heart. Be assured, Emma, I wouldn't want that little shit to be on the person who tipped the balance either way, said Buchanan. Emma was speechless. Another one of the chairman's admirable qualities was his ability to put his disagreements, however strongly felt, to one side once a board meeting was over. So what's the latest news on Sebastian? He asked as he joined Emma for a pre-lunch drink. Metron declares herself well satisfied with his progress. I am delighted to say that I can see a visible improvement every time I visit the hospital. The last cast on his left leg has been removed, and he now has 2 eyes and an opinion on everything, from why his uncle Giles is the right man to replace Gaitskell as leader of the Labour. Be careful what you wish for, Jeffrey Archer. Party to why parking meters are nothing more than another government ploy to extract more of our hard-earned money. I agree with him on both counts, said Rose. Let's hope his exuberant